What is up, my fellow andronauts? Welcome to our very first episode where we are going to provide some value for you guys. So I'm going to be talking about the hierarchy of your testosterone health journey. And so you can identify what specific phase you are in, why you're maybe not getting the results that you're looking for, and then ultimately where you want to go with this whole journey. Then I'm going to talk about a binder that blows activated charcoal right out of the water. And then I'm going to talk about a super vitamin found in butter that has some very unexpected benefits on sleep quality. And David here will be talking about how to hack your cholesterol genetics and why he's doing a lot of cholesterol experiments. And he's also getting absurd blood sugar benefits from eating more carbohydrates. So that's basically what he's going to talk about. So let's dive in. All right, so let me start with my first topic about the hierarchy, because I think this is like extremely interesting where people can make mistakes of and I think a lot of people will resonate with this as well, because like I identified myself in all of these levels. Like we've both been doing this for 10 years, so this is quite interesting. So level one, this is the fascination phase. This is basically when I just started learning about testosterone. There was like this article about like the 50 ways of how to increase testosterone. You're just doing freaking everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, you don't care about like the dose, the timing, the absorption, like any kind of trade-offs. You're just freaking doing everything.
Yeah, and you don't care about anything else either, right? I think that a lot of people get stuck in that stage for a really long time, where they're just looking at their testosterone, and then they're not realizing that they still don't feel great, and they're like their numbers on their T numbers look decent, but they don't feel good, and so it is definitely that early stage where it's like the real heavy focus on just one thing.
Yeah. So a lot of this is driven by curiosity. Also, it's easy to get overwhelmed with all of this information, because it's like you're learning so much initially. So there's a lot of excitation, but it can become overwhelming. And then you confuse the activity with progress. Right? Just because you're doing things doesn't mean you're going anywhere. So the problem with this is that the symptoms are loud because the foundation is broken. Right? So like you get interested in something because there's a problem. And so the symptoms are very loud, but that's why you're doing it. And then the supplements or whatever you're doing is becoming the crutch. Right? It's not actually fixing the root cause, because you don't even ultimately know what the root cause is. So that's level one. Level two, and now you're getting started with the journey. You've been doing this for a little bit, so you're getting a little bit more knowledge on this. And so this is the control phase. So let's start to fine tune this. It's like you start caring more about the extracts, the forms, the brands, the protocols, but you still use an aggressive amount of supplements. You're right. This is still like a very supplement focused way of going about it. And it's also chasing numbers than how you feel. So the mindset here is you think the solution is precision. You still assume the problem is missing input. So you need more and more and more. So this is still like an abundance level.
Yeah, and it's still just really the top level of things. It's not really foundational still at that point, is it? It's the couple of percent at the top rather than the big foundation of the basics, which are going to get that pyramid nice and tall for you, and then the supplements can come in at the top, right?
Yeah. All right, so the problem with this is the sequence is wrong, root causes remain untouched, and the progress plateaus eventually. And I think we've all been there. Then going on to level three, this is the disillusionment phase. Why isn't this working? Like I'm doing everything right. What is going on? So you get fatigue from stacking. Like after using 20 supplements for 3 weeks, you're like, man, I am over this. I hate supplements, right? And then even the supplements that you are using stop working. I don't know if you've experienced this, but you start a new supplement, and if it's not fixing the root cause, you might actually feel something for like a week or two, and then suddenly like all of the benefits just go away. It's like, it just stopped working.
There's obviously placebo benefits with certain things, as well. You're taking things, so you think, yeah, this must be working. But I can definitely relate to that point where when you're doing these experiments where you finish it and you're like, right, I'm never going to touch that, whatever it was, ever again. I had it the other day because, we'll go into it later, but I've been doing the sorghum experiment, right? And I was going heavy on sorghum pancakes, sorghum bread, sorghum waffle, sorghum porridge for like a week. And then I was like, I'm never going to eat sorghum again. And then 2 days later, I'm like back on sorghum because I was like, actually, I really like this. Like this stuff is going to, this stuff's going to stay. But yeah, you're like, I'm done with this.
You're like, all right, so I use this 20 supplements, I'm never touching them again, and then you go on Amazon and order 20 new supplements to use.
And you're straight back at it within days. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you start questioning, like at this level, this is level three. Like you start questioning, okay, like, why is supplements not working? It's like you start questioning: is it my gut? Is it my stress? Is it my digestion, inflammation? So this is where you start to learn more about the logic of things and getting closer to the root cause. Then we move over to level four, and this is the foundation phase. So this is the root cause repair, where finally it's fixed the system, not the signal. And this is where you start to realize, like, oh, testosterone is actually just a signal, it's just a symptom, right? So a lot of guys, and I see this quite a lot, people come to me and it's like, you know what, I want to work with you, but I'm focusing on my health first. So I first want to fix my gut issues and then I'll come to you for testosterone. And I'm like, dude, that is how you get high testosterone, is by focusing on your gut,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Also, it's, I'm going to lose weight first, or I'm going to do this first, or whatever. And it's like, actually, losing weight, you're going to increase your testosterone a lot as well, because you're going to have less, aromatase into estrogen and things like this. So all of those positive lifestyle steps that people make, their sleep, their nutrition, their digestion, nutrient absorption, reductions in body fat, all of these things add up to more, more testosterone at the end of the day.
Yeah. And so there, oftentimes when I'm speaking with clients, is basically from level four and higher. And for a lot of clients that come to me, they're like, I want to learn everything. I want to implement everything. And then I start to explain the system and why things break and go to the root cause. And like they want to be implementing like 20 supplements and 20 peptides and 20 this and 20 that. And then they realize, like, oh, it's just about eating nutrient dense foods and about eliminating inflammation. And then it's either like, oh, this is genius, or it's like, no, it's not that simple. That's either like the way they think about it. But like the reason why they ultimately come to level four is because like most supplements only work because they temporarily bypass a broken system. And so ultimately this is where you, and I think both of us like have long reached this point where we've now realized that food is even way more powerful than a supplement. So like we talked about this in the first episode, where you use something like NAC, and according to a study, it's like, wow, it significantly lowered my hsCRP, which is a marker of inflammation. And when you look at the actual numbers, it was like minuscule. And then you look at something like white button mushroom, it completely crushed it, got godlike benefits compared to NAC. And so like if you just focus on the foods, nutrient dense stuff, minimizing inflammation, you will get absurd results, right?
Yeah,
And so you
absolutely.
implement the foundation,
Yeah.
and then you realize like, oh, supplements is not even necessary anymore.
Exactly. Same with, things like lowering aromatase as well, right? So I had a guy message me, and he's on TRT, testosterone sitting at like 1700, but his estrogen was like 90 or something. Like it was really high. And he was like, should I take the AIs, blah blah blah, and all this kind of stuff. And for one, his T is slightly, it's above physiological ranges, so there's going to be that. And there are, there are these herbs and there are supplements that can have this minuscule effect on lowering estrogen. You could use like an olive leaf, which will have a small impact. You could use, whichever one you want to go for. But something like a white button mushroom, again, is going to have a bigger impact because it's something that you consume within your diet, and it affects your body in a different way. Positive impact on your microbiome and all of these things, and a reduction in inflammation, which you're not necessarily going to get from a lot of the herbal around, AIs. But with food, you can get big modulation in those types of things, which then the results compound over time.
Yeah. I'm so in love with like foods in terms of like food supplements. The way I view things now, it's like it's no longer a food. You're using a food for a specific purpose. It's now becoming a food supplement, because you're not just like sprinkling a little bit of white button mushroom in your food. You're actually like eating a certain quantity to get the desired outcome. That is technically like a supplement, but
Yeah.
just in a food form.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, then you get level 5, which is the mastery phase. And so now you realize like nothing is needed, everything works because you've already created the foundation and everything is really dialed in. And so this is where I tell people, it's like if you get to this point, you will realize supplements is not even needed. You won't have inflammation, your mitochondria will be working, right? Everything will be working the way it's supposed to. You don't even need it. But if you want to, you can do it. So that's kind of like the mastery phase where life is just simple. You can just go about your life and enjoy it. And that's the only thing you really do, because that's what we want to do. So we just want to enjoy our lives. People don't actually want to be full-time biohackers unless it's like their job.
No, no. You want to do as little as possible to make this stuff work at the end of the day, don't you? Because otherwise, it just takes up all your time. You know.
Yeah, it's like, would you rather do a 2 hour evening routine or instead spend time with your loved ones and have a good time instead? Like, oh, I'm gonna
Yeah.
go for the latter.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. 100%.
Right. Then we have level 6, which is the final phase, and this is where we are now. It's the optimal apex. So this is where now I choose what I want to experiment with, and I'm not using things to fix things. I'm using things to give me that edge, performance edge, right? You're going enhanced natty style. You're doing something extra. This is where you're going for, let's say you're elite athlete, and now you're using meldonium, or you're using slop or something like that. You're using compounds that just supercharges the results that you are looking for. So it's not to fix anything. You're basically experimenting to see how this compound is going to affect me, just pure interest sake, or it's to supercharge ultimately a goal that you have.
Yeah. And I think within that, it's making sure you've got a strong foundation before you begin those processes is obviously so important. Like the guy I mentioned earlier, for example, when he had his blood work done initially, you'd probably still see that his testosterone to estrogen ratio was probably off even before going on to TRT, and obviously a high dose of TRT, and that then gives you the information you need to know that as soon as those levels come up and up and up, estrogen's going to fire higher and higher and higher, and then he's walking around with double the levels of testosterone, but still with low libido, low energy, low mood.
Yeah.
And you could have seen that in the early bloods prior to going onto the TRT, most likely.
Yeah. And this is important for people, is like, don't over fixate on numbers, rather fixate on the ratios that you have. And so it's not just about the estrogen level, it's about the testosterone to estrogen ratio, or the DHT to estrogen ratio, androgens that's going to offset the estrogenic effects that ultimately matter. So initially, before I went on testosterone, I was listening to a lot of content from Vigor Steve, and he is a big proponent for, you do not want high estrogen, or you at least don't want estrogen to be over 60. And so the first time I did testosterone, I was like using aromasin to make sure my estrogen was around 60 or lower. And then someone asked, like, just stop it. Like back in the day, bodybuilders, they weren't even using aromatase inhibitors. And I was like, okay, like I'm very cautious. I know how harmful estrogen can be, promoting cancer, causing gyno, creating ED, like all of those kind of side effects. I don't want poofy nipples, thank you very much. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Let's go as an experiment. I'm going to be testing every single natural aromatase inhibitor out there to see what actually works. And this is how that journey for me started. Now, since then, I've increased my dose, and my testosterone is roughly like over 3,400. So very oftentimes I will skip injections just to get my testosterone low enough so the lab can actually pick it up, and so that I can get an accurate measure of my testosterone to estrogen ratio. But my estrogen now doesn't go over 120, which is double what Vigorous Steve suggested, but I don't get any estrogenic symptoms, like none whatsoever. So this is why the ratio is so important, and also like the sensitivity of your body to estrogen and the estrogen signaling. And so the more inflamed someone is, the more estrogenic they will automatically be, and the less androgenic they will be. And when I also just started my testosterone to estrogen ratio was like 13-1, which is atrocious. So I definitely was like either converting an excess amount to estrogen or just reabsorbing my excreted estrogen excessively. Mm-hmm. And then by focusing on my gut, by remodulating the microbiome and lowering beta-glucuronidase, which is the enzyme that reabsorbs estrogen, it normalized to 22-1. So if you look at most healthy individuals, they basically have a ratio of 20-1. That's kind of like a healthy testosterone to estrogen ratio. And so anything over that is really good. So with all of my experiments, like I know if something is working, I'm going over the 22-1 ratio. So if something is working really well, like the white beta mushroom, this is at least like over 30-1 ratio for me. So obviously it's not going to be as powerful as as a pharmaceutical aromatase inhibitor, but I'm not getting any side effects. And when you're healthy, you're not going to be excessively estrogenic.
No, exactly. And then and also for the symptoms that a lot of people are feeling when they've got, when they are on testosterone or have higher levels of testosterone, I think we're sort of led to believe that it's testosterone and estrogen are the only things to consider when TRT's in the picture, right? But I asked him if he'd had his prolactin tested previously, and he hadn't. So again, it's the estrogen could be an issue there, but also very low estrogen can be a problem for things like libido and that side as well. Anecdotally, it's something that I've heard. I haven't read studies on that, but I know people have experienced that when they've tanked their estrogens too much, they get issues with their skin irritation, joint pain, and loss of libido. But his obviously is nowhere near that low. But he hadn't had his prolactin measured. So again, there's many things at work here, many things at play that have to be considered in those types of situations.
Yeah, that's for sure. So I think I'm going to be talking more about it because I have an upcoming experiment with vitamin K, and this is one of my experiments to see how it affects my testosterone to estrogen ratio. So I was actually supposed to test today, but I feel like I want to extend it. I'm getting really interesting results, and I want to extend the experiment. So I'm probably going to extend it by another week or so, and then just test early to mid next week, and I should have the results by our next podcast.
And
But
what kind of dosage are you running for the MK4 K2?
what was that? The dose?
Yeah,
I'm running like close to 40 milligrams per day.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm using no close to 30. So I'm using
yeah.
like 15 to 16 milligrams twice a day. Yeah.
Yeah, I I've when I've run like some of my tests where I've been taking lots of compounds, K2's featured in those, and I do feel like it's a really promising addition to a stack for supporting testosterone to estrogen ratio. I definitely think it brings it all up. For a while,
Yeah.
I was using it topically with vitamin D, and I found that to be quite a nice thing to include. Basically, yeah.
Yeah. I'm not combining with vitamin D, but that should have been a good addition. But
Yeah.
all right, so that was kind of like my part for part one that I wanted to talk about. Let's go over to you.
So yeah, what I wanted to dive into was first up is some of my basically the experiment I'm running at the moment, which is with sorghum. So it's been sorghum flour and also some sorghum grain as well, which you can make like a rice with, or a porridge if you blend it up. Takes a long time to cook, but it's really useful. The majority of it, I've been making sorghum pancakes and sorghum waffles with a sorghum flour, which is the white sorghum. There's obviously different types of sorghum: red, black, white. There's one other as well, and the white is the lowest in the tannins, and so that's obviously, for me, a preference to have a slightly lower tannin content there. In terms of the results I've seen with it so far, I'm waiting for my blood work to come in at the moment, but I've been running a continuous glucose monitor I've been running that for about 2 or 3 months. I just put a new one on and go again, because in the run up to Christmas and a little bit further back in the year last year, I was seeing some kind of strange things with my blood sugar, some high fasted morning blood glucose, those sorts of things, and there were days where it'd be 110, and quite high levels. I got it pretty well regulated. I think mainly through reducing gut inflammation before bed, and utilizing things like activated charcoal and this fantastic product that Hans is going to talk about later as well, which has had a big impact on kind of sleep quality and things like that, because it does help with inflammation in the gut a lot. But whilst on the sorghum, my morning fasted glucose before the experiment was sitting around like 97, something like that, and then after 7 days it dropped to 75. So that's a massive reduction, right?
Yeah.
I'll go into why I think that's happened shortly, but just to let you know, that's a huge reduction for me, and the quality of my sleep's been much better, because my my glucose throughout the night has just been very very stable, and low and stable. So I felt when the levels were very high, my sleep was definitely like not as good quality. It was disrupted, and then also when I had like peaks and troughs through the night, I would definitely find myself waking up and the blood glucose drops, the cortisol spikes to get some more glucose out, and then you wake up because of the cortisol. That hasn't been happening, and the quality of my sleep has improved a lot. And then I've seen things like my HRV steadily work its way up, and that's up about 15 points on what it was a week ago as well, which for me is a
Yeah, that's
big
good.
difference because my HRV
Yeah.
sits like 50, something like that, and then it was up to like 65. So that's a huge difference for me personally.
Yeah, that's good.
Another couple of things that I've seen as well. So average glucose. So I've been bearing in mind for those 7 days, I was consuming like 400 grams of carb, like a lot of carbs a day, 400 grams of carbs a day, that kind of level. Sometimes a little less, but around that kind of level because I've been having the sorghum, but I've also still been having rice, fruit, and other carb sources as well. And my average glucose on those high carb days was only 95, and that's an average, right? Which is again great. And normally the average for days where I was eating a carbohydrate intake, but nowhere near as much, it would be 104. So I've not only increased my carbohydrate intake considerably, but in doing so, I've seen a reduction in average glucose. And then I kept the day after the sorghum experiment. I dropped to a low carb day because I often will do high carb and low carb days. I enjoy it. I find it to be really beneficial. You get to enjoy the benefits of high carb and the benefits of high fat whilst keeping your calories in check. It's something I really like. And off the back of the low carb day, my average glucose was 46. Sorry, 4.6, which is 82. And that an average for an entire day where I've eaten 3 meals and had a snack is very low for me. And then also seeing some big drops in glucose very quickly after I've had a meal. So, nice big healthy spike in blood glucose and then dropping down to, 61 after a meal, which is, that's kind of really low. But it just shows that it just shows that there's a lot going on here in terms of insulin release, I'd like to think, and then also some of the compounds within sorghum itself affecting the digestion and uptake of carbohydrates. So the main thing with that is a lot of blood sugar management tools like herbs and things. They work by reducing amylase, and so sorghum also reduces amylase. So for example, cooked sorghum flour, it's the starch digestibility is 15 to 25% lower to something similar like a maize flour. So it has a lot more undigestible carbohydrate or fiber in it, which obviously impacts that. And then it also lowers amylase. So there's compounds in there that actually will lower amylase. By lowering amylase, you're going to slow down the breakdown of carbohydrates. So you're not going to get that huge blood sugar spike immediately because it's going to take longer to break down the carbohydrates and get them into the blood. So you see a steadier release, which is also interesting where I've seen still a big spike and then it coming back down quite quickly, suggesting that there are some benefits in terms of my insulin response as well. And then the fact that then the blood glucose stays nice and steady after the meal, it doesn't kind of come back down and then kick back up again, which is something I would often see where I see a very quick drop and then it spikes back up again quickly before leveling out. This would just spike up, come down, and then level out low. So that's for me is a good sign. I've felt really good benefits from a digestive standpoint. I often suffer with too fast transit times and things like this, and it's definitely been beneficial for that. I think just slowing down the digestion, for me, slowing down that process is obviously really interesting and something that's I've felt benefit. And then also, sorghum can impact the GLP-1, right? So lots of this stuff where they've looked at it will compare it to like wheat flour and things like that, where it has a significant difference to GLP-1 to something like wheat flour. So I'm not sure how much of its effects are due to it affecting GLP-1, but it's definitely an interesting avenue that I want to investigate a little bit more. And one of the really exciting things about it as well is that you see some positive changes in gut bacteria through it, and specifically gut bacteria that help to reduce LDL and things like that. So my main reason for doing the sorghum experiment wasn't for blood sugar at all, right? I know for me, if something like berberine works great for blood sugar, if it does a fantastic job. That's something I'm going to be testing for cholesterol. The results coming in pretty soon as well. But my primary goal with the sorghum was to check for its impacts on cholesterol. I've got the kind of at-home test kits like this for cholesterol, which they're a bit iffy, but they do show some pretty good results from that. And I'll be getting the lab results in the next couple of days. But in animal studies, there's some amazing benefits to sorghum for lowering cholesterol. So, for example, there was a sorghum oil used for hamsters, which reduced LDL by 69%. Sorghum flour, reducing it by 40%, and then a fermented sorghum flour, reducing it by just under 50%. And also it having a positive impact on testosterone, reducing prolactin, and all of the, I think anything that's going to help ease gut inflammation, things like that, is going to have a positive impact on the prolactin there as well. So lots of major benefits there. The reason for me needing to do this experiment is not because I think cholesterol is bad. Like, I don't. I value cholesterol a lot. I know how important it is. But I have hyperfamilial cholesterolemia, so my body produces it in excess. I can go on a zero cholesterol diet and my cholesterol will be 400 still. So, it doesn't matter how much or how little I eat of it. My body overproduces it. I did the gene tests, and I've got issues in several of the main cholesterol genes, and so it's essentially the overproduction of cholesterol, and then the body not recognizing that there's an overproduction of cholesterol, so a continued overproduction of cholesterol. There are gene tests you can look into for that. If that's something you're interested in. The main ones for me are the LDLR gene, which sorghum does have an impact on. It has polycosonals, which are like these parts of the lipids, and it has a very high content of those. And those independently have been shown to lower cholesterol. So they extracted from sorghum and applied, and that's actually in human trials with up to a 20% reduction in people's LDL who have normal LDL levels, right? So they're coming in with completely fine cholesterol, and just with this particular compound from sorghum, without the fiber, without all the other things, they're seeing a 20% reduction. So it's a really interesting thing, and I am excited to see the results. I think I'm going to see a decent lowering, but it may not be as much as some people would see, because I do have issues in some of the other genes as well that it does not impact. So it's going to be a really interesting one. But sorghum's something that you've been interested in for a long time, so I'd be interested to get your take on some of the benefits in your eyes as well, Hans.
I have not done a deep dive on sorghum except the hormonal effects, and so I'm very, very excited for your DHT results to come out, because that will kind of confirm if sorghum actually works for that. But I wanted to ask you in terms of, people might say like, okay, if the benefits is primarily due to the inhibition of amylase, right, then it will only help with eating sorghum itself, and it will not have a benefit on the other carbohydrates that you're also consuming. So have you tasted your glucose response to other carbohydrates and seen that that is different as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So for example, I did. I had like sushi rice, or so like sticky rice, and with a similar quantity, and there was a much larger prolonged spike in blood glucose, and then, as I said, it would come down relatively low, but then it would bounce back up again, stay high, and it would then kind of struggle to come back down again. And I think that shows where, in the average glucose over 24-hour periods, how much it's dropped, of the effect that it has in regulating that. Another thing that I like about sorghum as well is that it does have an impact on the HMG CoA reductase enzyme, which is, they say that's a rate limiting enzyme for cholesterol, because it's basically responsible for its creation and processing. And sorghum has a dose-dependent effect on that as well. So it is definitely coming at this from a lot of angles, and I'm also very excited to see it from a DHT perspective. So I had my DHT tested on Tuesday. We got to wait 10 days for that, unfortunately. So
That's
um,
excruciating.
but like I'm seeing a little bit of extra beard growth up here. I don't know. I think like I'm like I definitely, uh, there's definitely like that beard's creeping up. Like soon it's going to be up here maybe, and I'll be like, yeah, that's the stuff. Um, and I did a little bit more research into the DHT side of it as well, and obviously there's the kind of study that compares it to the rice bran and these types of things where it shows up to 56% increases in 5-AL1 in the prostate. So it was measuring it in the prostate. There are some studies showing that it may lower 5-AR2 in the prostate, but that's kind of good in some ways because obviously prostate DHT doesn't particularly cross into the blood. That it's quite like prostate and serum DHT are relatively independent from my understanding, and 5-AR1 is more prevalent in things like the skin, in things that are going to be more in line with serum DHT rather than 5-AR2, which is more it's definitely more occupied in the prostate. And so again, with a lot of the prostate ones, it's difficult to really know because often they'll use these very, very high doses, which are just going to eclipse anything because it's just like poison, toxic. Do you know what I mean? Like outrageous dosages. So it's difficult to see that. But what I will be able to see is I'll be able to just compare it to my DHT I had done about a month ago when I was on just like a normal supplement program and not eating stacks and stacks of sorghum. So that's going to be really interesting. And then also to see if it contributes to the lowering of my prolactin as well. Often I'll have elevated prolactin, I think from gut inflammation primarily, and also because my partner is pregnant. And so as her prolactin's going up, so is mine. The pheromones are kicking in. And they're kicking into me too. So I think you can tell if your partner's pregnant from testing your own prolactin. Probably, it might be the early time. But no,
Yeah.
that's something that will be interesting, and also something for me to test once the baby's born as well to see, 4 weeks or 6 weeks into having a baby around, how does that does that impact prolactin and these sorts of things, or how much does it? Because there are studies on it, but it's just some interesting topics to dive into with that.
I think this whole concept, a lot of people would say like when someone is getting a kid, right, the testosterone drops in the man. And I think that's a cop out. And I think the reason why testosterone drops, obviously because you're not getting a lot of sleep, but then also the reason why prolactin goes up is not so that you are a better dad. It's like that crying is actually frustrating. And so any kind of a stress on you is going to increase your prolactin. So that is rather my explanation than like it just makes you a better dad. Because if you do everything correctly, you eat right, you sleep right, all those kind of stuff, if you can,
Yeah.
you're not going to experience a drop in testosterone.
No, absolutely, and also you have to think about from the standpoint of the mother as well. So there's multiple, there's obviously there's more than one way in which the baby will help to increase the prolactin production of the mother for milk production, right? So obviously from actually breastfeeding is one of the key ones because obviously that's going to stimulate it, but also there is, the pheromones and things like that impact prolactin production in the mother for stimulating milk. I imagine it's simply that the baby can't divert that to only the mother, and that is going to actually impact anyone that is around them to a large degree. So it's not directed at the father necessarily, so that they're not motivated and they haven't got and they cry all day. Like it's not diverted at them. But they're kind of, they get hit with the stray shots, I think with that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to track back to the sorghum and 5-alpha reductase. So this is actually interesting. When you read a lot of the studies, a lot of them is in vitros and cell cultures. And so they try to extract some of the components from a herb or a grain like sorghum, for example. And they find that, there are certain compounds in sorghum that actually inhibits 5-alpha reductase. And they identified that compound, and this was the same in, I think, sulfonylurea and like a few other compounds as well. The component responsible is linoleic acid, which is an omega-6 that you find in most foods. And based on that research, that to me is irrelevant because the amount of linoleic acid that you're going to consume from any kind of herb or even a grain is going to be so low compared to something you would consume from chicken or eggs or even dairy, for example. So with that in mind, like those healthy foods should have been crushing your DHT all along, which it doesn't do. And then, damn, I was going to mention something else, but now I forgot. I was thinking you got me interested in the sorghum from a gut perspective because I think
Yeah,
like a lot of the reasons why people get better blood sugar responses, better sleep, all of this kind of stuff is actually linking back to the gut. Like most studies that study this find that metformin was good for insulin or insulin sensitivity because it increases akkermansia or like it
yeah.
modulates the microbiome in some way, right? That's just one example.
I sent you the article the other day. Metformin it encourages the production of TUDCA, right? So it's
Yeah,
encouraging bile acid production as well. So, you know, could it be that its benefits are purely based on the fact that it modulates gut microbiome and it helps increase a really positive bile acid that's really beneficial for blood
yeah.
sugar management? TUDCA is great for blood sugar. TUDCA is great for cholesterol, right? There's human studies on TUDCA for lowering LDL, improving blood sugar. So it's a really interesting concept that a lot of these drugs and things like that work by modulating things that are already present or relevant in that within the body, and the results are kind of because of that, or partly because of that.
Yeah, so I was thinking like I might try this if I can actually just stick with it and not feel like completely over it. But maybe I can do an experiment where I consume like 100 grams of sorghum per day for like a month and do a stool test before and after to see like how it actually modulates the microbiome. At the
Yeah.
moment, I'm also mega dosing a calcium fiber for that, so I'm gonna do a stool test in like 3 weeks or so. Then I was thinking of doing the partially hydrolyzed guar gum, just to see like how the two compare.
Mm.
But I
Yeah.
think I might do the sorghum first.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
that will
it's a
be like
nice
really
one.
interesting.
It's a good one to do long term, isn't it? Like, I think to see positive benefits in microbiome, you definitely need to give it a little bit more time. But I'll send over these articles on the improvements, because there's improvements in pH, in SCFA production, and also in like different types of positive bacteria, and just general intestinal health. So it's really interesting. And actually, some of the bacteria that it's shown to improve, you can then read up on and being linked in to improve things like blood sugar management and LDL and things like that, for example. I think for me, a lot of my blood sugar issues were coming from some gut issues. Whether I didn't do I ordered a SIBO test. I didn't send it off in the end, but maybe I was struggling with something along those lines for a little bit. And the last few months of adding things in and changing things within my diet has seen some positive benefits there. I am going to do a stool sample fairly soon, and then obviously I could start to look into that in a little bit more detail. But I think initially it's it's definitely a really interesting route to go down. For me, with the sorghum, I've definitely felt benefits in terms of um, transit time, digestion. I think if I've had a large amount, there is a little bloating that comes with it in terms of you feel quite full, but that's also could be from shifts in leptin and ghrelin or GLP-1 for example as well. It doesn't necessarily. I might just be feeling full because it's sending signals that I'm full as well. Um, and I haven't had major gas or any none at all actually. Whereas when I've tried to do this with more things that are just straight fiber, that can like if you do megadose on like Kestos or megadose on a Acacia fiber or something like that, you can that can be pretty bad from from a gas perspective, can't it? Whereas I haven't had any of that with the sorghum, even when I was eating like 400 grams of sorghum in a day. So
Yeah, that's a lot.
yeah.
Man, I just thought about it. I think I should make like a sorghum banana bread. Like, oh, that's gonna be crazy
That's a
delicious.
great idea. Yeah, that's an amazing idea. So I also just ordered some sorghum syrup because one of the experiments I'm doing at the moment is with the fermented herbs, and I've been using honey, but instead of using honey, I'm going to use sorghum syrup for the carbs for that, which I'm quite excited about. I think
Yeah.
that's going to be a nice addition to it. I've got
Yeah.
the blood results for that on Tuesday or when I've got the test on Tuesday or Wednesday for that next week. So in the next week or so, I'll have the blood results for the fermented herbs as well, which I'm excited for.
What does your current fermented herb mixture look like?
So the current mixture is I've got like fresh ginger. So ginger great for LH production and all these types of things, right? So we've got to have the fermented ginger in there. I've got bitter melon. So there was the animal studies I talked about last time showing improvements in testosterone, free testosterone, and also there was a study in tennis players showing a substantial reduction in prolactin after exercise compared to placebo. So there's some interesting things at play there with bitter melon. Bitter melon's a really fascinating herb or fruit in this case, but there's very mixed reviews on it if you Google it, right? There's things talking about like reductions in fertility and things like that. But again, when you look at the dosages that they've been provided, it's like an eclipse. It's like it's so much of it that cells are not going to stand a chance. Whereas when you look at things like the animal studies in rats where they've actually supplemented them with in real animal studies where they've given it to them and then they've actually tested the outcomes. Bitter melon showed increases in testosterone, whether it was fermented or not. It's just a fermented version showed bigger increases. So ginger, bitter melon. I've got some Butea superba in there as well. I've got some berberine in there too. And then I've got Lactobacillus brevis, Lactobacillus reuteri, and it's a particular strain of reuteri which I like because there's multiple strains of reuteri. Some kick off histamine in a major way. The particular strain that I'm running does not increase histamine. So for me, that works quite nicely because I can get a little aggravated from histamine. And then I've got Kestos and honey and some champagne yeast. So that's a mix in there. So yeah, it's a nice simple blend at the moment. It would be very easy to be like, right, I want to put this in there, I want to put that, like I want to load up chrysin in there, I want to load up Sustancia in there, I want to load up, but I'm trying to keep it a little bit more simple than that just to get a good foundation, and then I can experiment with different herbs as we go.
Yeah, dude, you can't afford being horny right now. Like, what are you doing?
I know. I mean, that's the only thing is obviously I've I've been doing a little bit of like a bit of work on prolactin, which is going to link into one of the things you're going to talk about shortly with the vitamin E, right? You're going to cover that in a little bit today.
Okay, vitamin K. I'm going to talk about vitamin K instead.
Oh, vitamin K instead. Okay, well, I'm going to talk a little about vitamin E in that case, just because I've been prior to the sorghum experiment, I was doing some experiments for that prolactin because my prolactin levels were very high, and I've experimented with a few different types of vitamin E. So when you look at the studies on vitamin E, there's vitamin E. It doesn't necessarily break it down into the components or what is it? Is it tocopherols? Is it tocotrienols? Is it alpha tocotrienol? Is it gamma? Like there's lots of different parts to vitamin E, and they all have their benefits. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to actually narrow down to which ones benefit for prolactin. And I think I'm not. I'll be sure probably by tomorrow. But with my testing at home, I've seen some good reduction in prolactin with alpha tocotrienol. Right. So it's an interesting one because for a long time I was using tocopherols, and I didn't really see much benefit to my prolactin. And then I ordered a tocotrienol, but it didn't have alpha tocotrienol in it, and I didn't see any benefits to my prolactin. And then I got another tocotrienol that's highest in alpha tocotrienol, and it is promising. I'm not going to say like the results are in, but it is promising. And so I think if anyone has high prolactin and they are thinking about using vitamin E, like maybe try alpha tocotrienol and then send me the results and let me know if I'm onto something with that. But basically, the alpha tocotrienol, it covers a lot of the inflammation bases I'm sure all the tocotrienols do, but in particular, the alpha tocotrienol covers a lot of the inflammation bases that contribute towards excessive prolactin production. So TNF alpha, IL-6, IL-1, IL-2, these types of inflammation markers, or cytokines, which elevate. They're shown to elevate prolactin. The alpha tocotrienol has been shown to be very productive at lowering those specific ones. So it's an interesting thought, right? I'll definitely have some hard facts for you next time, but for now, it's an interesting concept, and it's something I'd like to experiment with a little bit more as well.
Yeah, I think this is like very important for people because when you look at vitamin E studies on prolactin, I think all of them, but the few that there are, they're only using alpha tocopherol. So the fact that you are doing like identifying which one is really the most effective, because like prolactin can be elevated for a variety of different reasons. And so using the right vitamin E for your specific case, I think like that's some groundbreaking self-experimentation right there.
Yeah, I'm really interested in it, and also. The tocotrienols have really positive effects on dopamine as well. I'm sure the tocopherols do too, but if you dive into the research on tocotrienols for dopamine pathways, it's quite exciting. And obviously, we know that dopamine is one of the best ways of suppressing prolactin, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's some interesting ideas there. Restoring TH levels, neuroprotective. And then also, yeah, I mean, enhancing dopamine receptor function, lots of exciting things there. So I'm gonna probably I've got a lot of experiments I want to do, right? It's the same as you, and so I'm gonna have to like iron out exactly where I want to go with this. For me, priority wise, cholesterol is something because I've got this issue of high cholesterol. It's something that I want to regulate before I get too excited about anything else because it's going to elevate my inflammation. It's potentially going to be causing problems with inflammation that if I don't get that dialed in, then that could then have a negative impact on some of the other studies and things I want to experiment with. So that just is where I'm at the moment with that. So yeah.
Yeah, this is exciting. Like I just took a note. So I'm gonna buy some tocotrienols as well and try that eventually too to see like if it works, and then compare it to my tocovit experiment that I did,
Yeah.
which is very high in alpha tocopherol and contains no tocotrienols. So I want
Yeah,
to compare
yeah.
those two.
So
But I do.
the one I just bought contains no tocopherols, right? So that's
Yeah.
interesting, yeah. But the one I had previously had tocotrienols, but on the bloods when I was taking it, it didn't help with my prolactin. So I'm just wondering if for my specific case, if it's that, if it's more generalized, then great, we're onto something big. That would be really exciting.
Yeah, that's great, man. All right, so let me talk about the binder that blows activated charcoal out of the water. So I'm a big proponent for activated charcoal. A lot of people think you only use a binder when you're intoxicated, you have food poisoning, you swallowed some drugs. This is what they use in emergencies, which it is used for. But it is very good for binding an excessive amount of cholesterol, helping to excrete it from the body. It binds to a variety of toxins, including endotoxin. It binds to inflammatory bile acids. So what usually happens is bile is produced in the liver. It's go to the gallbladder where it's stored. You eat a fatty meal. It's released to help with the digestion. All of that is primary bile. The primary bile goes to the intestine where it's then converted into secondary bile. So if you have pathological bacteria overgrowth or you have SIBO, you have some of those bacteria that will excessively convert it into harmful, like the dose makes the poison, right? So when you have an excessive amount of bad bacteria, there's going to be an excessive amount of specific bile acids that can become highly inflammatory and then also start to damage the liver once it's getting reabsorbed. So using activated charcoal binds to all of that, excretes it from the body.
Yeah, and
Now,
also with charcoal as well, it's shown to lower cholesterol in a dose-dependent manner, wasn't it? Because it reduces the reabsorption of cholesterol in the it binds to the cholesterol and extracts it that way. And I have seen some pretty solid results in the past with charcoal as well. So, if I was to do the ultimate cholesterol stack, I think charcoal would definitely feature in that too.
yeah. So the binder that we have been experimenting with lately is called Interos gel. So it works technically the same way. It has this porous form, so it doesn't absorb, it adsorbs the compound. so it doesn't get absorbed into the body similar way to activated charcoal. But the pore sizes are smaller, and so it's almost a little bit more specific towards binding toxins than just broad general stuff. So it's almost more specific. So again, it's been developed in the, I think, Eastern Europe countries and being used in Russia as well, especially during like when you're out in the wilderness, out in the wild, you have no help and you get food poisoning or something like that. You use it, it binds to the toxins and whatnot. So when you go to the pharmacy where they sell it and it's like, hey man, I want some terrace gel, they're always like, oh shit, are you like poisoned or something? It's like, no, I just want to use it for general health. But it can actually be also used for IBS and like inflammatory bowel conditions, because it is so great at binding the toxins that causes inflammation. And I always focus excessively on the gut, because when you have inflammation in the gut, for whatever reason, it will reduce mitochondrial function, and then you have impaired transit time, you have impaired digestion, absorption of nutrients, it leads to nutritional deficiencies. You start creating leaky gut, and it reduces the cells that create the natural antibiotics in the body. And so your risk of getting SIBO or bacterial overgrowth or fungal overgrowth increases dramatically, because your own ability to take care of that goes away. Right, so just by fixing intestinal inflammation, you can actually remodulate and reshape the gut towards a healthy state, because there's not inflammation. You automatically fix the leaky gut, so endotoxin is not being absorbed. The pH becomes restored. People's transit times actually normalize. Transit time is basically a contraction of muscles, right? And so when a muscle is fatigued, that there's no energy, it can't contract, this is when you get slow transit time. And a very big reason for why the mitochondria is not working is because it's inflamed. There's a toxin that's bombarding it, can't work. Now you get rid of the toxin, the cell can produce energy and restores normal transit time without you having to use a laxative. So from what I've seen, we've been using it a lot in the Andronaut Academy, which I will link in the description for you guys. A couple of guys have been using it and getting really, really great results, seeing better sleep, better HRV, less brain fog, better digestion, normalization of transit time, whether they had diarrhea or constipation. There's this one review I'm going to read for you guys, just to give you an idea of what the process kind of like looks like, because he logged it like day 1, day 2, day 3. All right, so day 1, he said he was shocked. Around 8 hours after the first dose, started with a headache after dinner. And I've had maybe 2 headaches in my entire life, and I started to feel my hands aching and a sort of floaty feeling in my head. I went to bed immediately, slept through the whole night. So that was day 1. And this is what a couple of guys have realized or noticed, is that initially you get some weird die-off or some kind of toxic effect. And then after like day 3 to 5, this is when things really start to improve. So day 2, he experienced low energy. He woke up and wanted to go back to bed, slightly blurry vision, ended up needing a nap around 1 p.m., 2 bowel movements, no ghost wipe, stinky farts, went to sleep super early, about 3 hours earlier than normal, and then pretty crappy low energy day. Day 3, woke up early and went and was immediately happy. Really cool feeling, like actually well rested, pooped after coffee, was a ghost wipe, good stool quality hours later. Not a single bit of gas, great mental clarity. There is also this lightness in my gut and slight appetite increase. That was day 3. Then we have day 4. Felt anabolic in the gym last night. It's been months since I've felt this oomph training. If I can describe this feeling, it's as if I had an anchor on me and now it was removed. Really solid training day, lots of grunting, throwing around some heavy dumbbells. This morning had a large bowel movement, had to go really bad soon after breakfast, haha. So that's usually like your colon is actually responding to the signal. So you get that sensation to go to poop, which people with constipation don't have. Ended up being a ghost wipe. I then went again 2 more times. It feels like my body is moving food quickly through now, like not in a bad way, just like restored to transit time. Other things I've noticed, my appetite has increased, but it's not a ravenous craving, more a desire to fuel my life. My gut feels light and overall have a light feeling. Vision is sharper. This is really cool to see. I am also a bit more chill than normal. I am super calm all the time, so this is a zen. And then he also mentioned about his girlfriend's actually gotten a lot of interesting benefits as well. And so like he goes on like day 6, day 5 is like amazing stuff. So it's just like initially it might be a little bit bad, and then it just gets better and better and better. And everything, you just start to feel energized and happy and light. And this is what I talk about, like when you remove an inflammatory trigger, the cells can now work the way they're supposed to, and you just go back to your normal baseline, and people don't even know what that normal baseline is like anymore. They're like, oh, I'm on freaking I'm caffeinated out of my mind, right? And then they feel happy, but that's actually your normal without caffeine.
Yeah. Yeah, so I can also attest to this working really well. So I tried it a couple of weeks ago before I didn't run it with the sorghum experiment because I didn't want to there'd be some overlapping benefits, right? So I didn't want to confuse the situation there. So I stopped it then. And I didn't want, I didn't want to stop it because I found it to be really useful. So for me, as I said before, my issue can be too quick transit time, loose stool, that type of thing. And it fixed that almost instantly. And so I suffered no discomfort with it whatsoever. A little gas maybe the first day I used it. I'd have it. The main time I'd have it was before bed. Sleep improved. All of these positive outcomes, and then also it's for me it slowed down transit time, which was a fantastic result. So I'm a huge fan of it as well. I did use it once on one day when I was on the sorghum experiment, and that's actually because I went to the sauna with a friend of mine, and the binders, whilst sauning, supposedly can be very beneficial. And so I was like, hey, I'm not going to waste this opportunity. Let's get, let's load up on some of the, some of this binder before I go in for the sauna, which was great. But I think as soon as for the next phase where I'm not testing anything that's kind of gut related, which is now really, I'm going to incorporate that back in probably twice a day. I think it's good to have it away from meals, like any binder. I think it's probably best to have at least 90 minutes, 2 hours between, before or after meals. So for me, having it before bed works quite well, especially now because I'm on a zero supplements before bed routine. It's quite good because it means I can just have that, and that's my new sleep supplement, right? Which is funny, but that works better than the sleep supplements that I was using before. And then the other time I'm going to have it is probably after maybe after the biggest meal I have of the day, especially if it's maybe a high fat meal or a high carb meal or something that might kick up a little bit of inflammation for whatever reason, based on digestion or whatever. I would incorporate it after the largest meal. So I'd be looking to have it twice per day.
Yeah, that's basically the way I have it as well. And in terms of sleep, this is a great way to take it because a lot of people that have restless sleep and they don't understand why that is happening, right? They're getting bad dreams, chaotic dreams. It's not like peaceful, restful, restorative. And that's the same concept where, let's say you have slow transit time, you have some bacterial overgrowth. Now you eat your last meal like 2 to 3 hours before bed. By the time you're in bed, that food is still like in your digestive tract, right? And transit time just slows down a lot when you're lying down. There's very little digestion going on. So now you're sleeping with all of that and gives the bacteria more time to ferment and create toxins from it. And so now during sleep, you have this low level inflammation that is disrupting your sleep quality. And interestingly, is like just consuming food like glucose actually helps to prevent leaky gut. But now when you're sleeping, there's like 8+ hours where you're not consuming any food. There's no glucose that's going to help to prevent the leaky gut. So the risk of getting leaky gut is getting bigger as you sleep. And so there's like more toxins, more leaky gut being absorbed, disrupting your sleep quality. So now you take the Interogel, that binds to the endotoxin, and it dramatically improves your sleep quality, even there's no direct pro-GABA neurotransmitter benefit in that regard.
No, and I think they're probably, although it's not actively increasing those things, it will be actively allowing them to run as they should, right? And I think that's, if the body is putting out fires while you're asleep, then it's not going to be productive in terms of optimizing things like melatonin production or whatever it might be that could be causing you, impacts with your sleep. And also, if you've got the gut issues, that might be leading to things like elevated cortisol through the night because of issues with digestion, for example. And again, that's where it's going to kick in and really help. So I'm a big fan of this. and I think it's a great addition to probably most people's stack. I don't think there's that many people that wouldn't benefit from it in some way or another.
Yeah, you can use it long term. People think it's like a cute binder that you use just for like occasions, but you can technically use it long term. And because of the smaller pore size, there's a much lower risk of binding to nutrients. So technically, you can take it with food, and it's not going to cause any deficiencies. But just to be on the safe side, it's better to take it like 1 to 2 hours away from supplements and foods.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, even with charcoal, for quite a while, I actually did incorporate it into my morning shake, and I didn't feel any downside to that necessarily, right? And I know, obviously there's some of the ideas that charcoal will bind to vitamins and minerals and things like that, but there are some studies showing charcoal usage over long periods don't deplete key nutrients and things like that. And I think
Yeah.
for anyone that does have issues with like bile acid malabsorption or issues with bile acid diarrhea, these types of things, which again are these similar in symptom gut issues to things like SIBO and whatnot. Again, it's gonna massively benefit those people as well. So I think there's benefits all around.
Yeah. So just for people knowing, I have articles on activated charcoal and on the Enteros gel. I will link those for you guys in the description below. And since we are on the topic of sleep, I've been using the vitamin K2 MK4 specifically sublingually for enhanced absorption as my estrogen experiment. The way it basically works is not directly by inhibiting estrogen, but by activating the enzyme 17 beta HSD that stimulates the conversion of estradiol, the strongest estrogen, into estrone, a much weaker estrogen. So technically, just by changing that ratio, you shift away from a estrogen dominant state, so to speak. So I don't know if it will actually lower my estrogen, but unfortunately my lab doesn't show, like I can't test estrone there. So I'm just going to be looking at my testosterone to estrogen ratio. But one thing that I didn't expect from vitamin K is that it actually improves my sleep quality. So deep sleep improved, my HRV is going up, my heart rate dip during sleep is actually lower. Even if I tended to be in a more sympathetic state, let's say I was drinking a little bit of alcohol before bed, which do put you in a sympathetic state. Like despite that, so let's say usually if I had some alcohol before bed, my heart rate dip would be like 5%. Let's say it's 5%. Now with a K2, it's at least over 10%, like where it's supposed to be, between 12 and 15% drop in heart rate. So that was quite interesting. And then I was like, okay, why is this happening? I have a few ideas. But it works via the PXR nuclear receptor, which can be involved in the circadian rhythm. So that's one of the aspects. It's also powerful anti-inflammatory. So this is what we just spoke about with the Enteros gel and activated charcoal. Anything that lowers inflammation is going to pull you away from a sympathetic state, because ultimately if there's inflammation, it hypersensitizes the sympathetic nervous system also to glutamate, right? So there's more glutamate activity, more catecholamines going on, so you have more restless sleep, more waking up time, and just by lowering the inflammation you can go into a more sympathetic dominant state and get better sleep. The other benefit could be, the mechanism could be like due to better mitochondrial health, by helping the electron transport chain create ATP, acting as an electron acceptor. Now, obviously, there's some studies showing that MK4 doesn't substitute for coenzyme Q10, but that is not the goal here. It's just to help create NAD and help with ATP production. Then the other benefit, and you also touch upon this with the sorghum, and I think this might be a huge benefit here, is that it improves glucose metabolism and insulin sensitivity. So the better your glucose is going to be during your sleep, the better your sleep is going to be. And you mentioned something interesting, is that the glucose is lower during sleep and then you're sleeping better versus when it's higher, right?
Yeah.
And so the vitamin K2 actually helps with glucose disposal. So you have better glucose control and then fewer nocturnal glucose spikes and crashes. Mm-hmm. And therefore you end up with better deep sleep. So I think that was fascinating.
That's interesting. That I did for a little while. I didn't test this thoroughly, but I just did a little experiment with it. But using augmentine before bed, because augmentine can be useful for glucose disposal too, and that definitely had a blood sugar lowering effect throughout sleep. And so that's something I'm gonna definitely test again. But the K2 sounds like something I should add back in at some point or test. when I used it previously, like I said, I was using it topically. I was using it with vitamin D straight on the testes, and was definitely, at that point was feeling pretty good. I can't necessarily pinpoint it to that, but again, it would be an interesting thing for me to look at, and potentially look at testosterone levels for that at some point.
Yeah, I unfortunately don't have a continuous glucose monitor, so I can't see my blood sugar levels during the night. But I think like it will have that effect. So I can taste before bed and then after bed, after sleeping, but it's obviously not going to be the same. And then some of the other mechanisms is by improving like the MK4 is the predominant vitamin. I think of the vitamin K in your brain, 98% of it is the MK4. So it's extremely important for neurological health. And just by improving neurological health, you also can reach deeper sleep because of better neurological health and less inflammation. And then the other one was improved vascular health. So it helps with the elasticity of your vasculature. And so there's an effect called the nocturnal dipping with this vasodilation when you're sleeping. And by improving the elasticity, you get better vasodilation and then better sleep quality ultimately, because now the body temperature can actually drop the way it's supposed to and you sleep better.
Yeah, I mean, I think the K2 sort of got a little bit of a bad rap, like over the years, hasn't it? In terms of things like lipids and also for people using like blood thinners and this type of thing. But it does actually show positive results from from a lipid perspective and all sorts of things. So I think it's in particular the MK4 I think is a really interesting addition, and something that I'll be excited to see those results, especially on testosterone to estrogen ratio and things like that. I think that would be fascinating.
Yeah, like the important thing here is that the MK4 doesn't cause coagulation. It's not going to cause blood clotting. So people don't have to be afraid of that. It might be involved in the coagulation process just to make sure that there is no deficiency, but it doesn't cause an excess. It's more like ensure that it's working the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of like my bits. Vitamin K for sleep, that was really interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be dropping an article of that soon, next
Right.
Friday, when I get the results back. The Interis gel, obviously been using that. I'm probably going to use it long term and then keep on doing stool tests to see how things change. And the other one was the hierarchy of where someone is in their journey. So it would be interesting to hear from you guys where you feel like you're in this journey. And I hope that was helpful to see like, okay, so this is ultimately the end goal. Right? You don't have to get there. You don't have to become the pioneer, like doing these experiments like we are doing, but just getting to the point that you know that solving the root causes will fix everything above that.
Yeah, definitely. And you can leave the more niche stuff to us, where you can figure out, like, So we talked about the pheromone side of things briefly, obviously. So that's something that I'm going to be testing maybe tomorrow or on Tuesday next week, where I'm going to basically expose myself to copulins, which are like the fatty acid. They're like the fatty acid parts of pheromones that the female will produce. There is some interesting research in this. Most of it says that there's no benefit whatsoever, but there was a study like in 1997, and it showed, there's talk of it showing up at 150% increase in T levels. So hey, for the sake of a little experiment, if to get a nice spike in testosterone like that for something like training performance, or for date night, or whatever it might be, is a really interesting idea. So I'm just going to basically, in fact, it'd be good to get your thoughts on this, Hans. But I'm basically going to run a blood test. Then I'm going to expose myself to the pheromones for a period of time, and then I'm going to retest. So the test can be done pretty quickly within each other. I was going to expose myself to it for about an hour and then test again. What do you think? Do you think that's an appropriate amount of time to see some kind of action?
What I would do is I would expose myself for like a minute max,
Yeah.
and then test like as frequently as you can.
Sure.
Because I think you're gonna get a cute spike and then it's gonna come down relatively quickly. So you don't want to miss that spike.
Yeah,
and then you
true.
can see, because I'm only cautious that the longer you expose yourself to it, the more blunted the increase in testosterone is gonna be.
Yeah.
That's my
Also,
perspective on it.
also we know that when you see a spike in testosterone, you often see a trough in testosterone as well, right? So, like an exercise, training might give you a spike in testosterone, but then you might see your levels drop below normal levels for a period of time afterwards. And so it could be a similar situation where you might get the initial spike, and then it might actually trough lower than baseline potentially. But
Yeah.
I think if I could maybe run it. So I did a test every 15 minutes or something for an hour afterward. I'm gonna have to take a lot of blood for that, but hey, it'd be worth it. Maybe I do want to I expose myself to it for a minute or two, test at 5 minutes, and then test at 15 and 30 or something like that, to see how those levels might fluctuate. That could be an interesting one.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people, or some people might agree with us. They've also noticed the same thing, where if a woman is on a cycle, like on a monthly cycle, right? There's days where she's going to have no libido, and then when she ovulates, she's going to have very high libido, right? There's this fluctuation.
Yeah.
But I very much think that the husband and the wife starts to sync up, that the husband also starts to go on a kind of cycle like that with her. And I think that's probably a lot to do with the pheromones, exactly.
I think
Because
so.
if your
Yeah.
wife is ovulating, you're like just more horny for no reason.
Yeah.
Like you don't always get it. Right?
Yeah, and I mean, in this, they did some weird studies on this, but they did look at like pheromones at different stages of ovulation, things like that, and there were changes in their impact throughout different stages. Naturally, it makes sense, right? So, that's going to be an interesting one to test. In terms of where to get the copulins from, this is an interesting thing because you can buy the pheromone perfumes, right, or fragrances, and you can actually buy unscented pheromone fragrances that people will add to their own fragrance or use them. There's the androstione one for men, right? Is that the one that's commonly used for men, Hans? Yeah, and
There's a
and
couple.
there's a couple, but they again, I think that they are. There's not much actual direct evidence on how effective this stuff is and the impact of it. So it'd be an interesting experiment.
Yeah, the only thing is like androsterone works really good as a male pheromone,
Yeah.
and the only thing is like my wife knows what it smells like. So if I start putting it on, she's like, "Yeah, well, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing that?" But she will automatically know like I'm trying to like induce stuff.
Yeah, it has a distinct odor, doesn't it? For sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that would be something I'm interested to test. And then in terms of results, I'll have my prolactin results in pretty soon, and then I'm gonna have my full bloods from the sorghum experiment. We got like 8 days to wait for my DHT, but that'll be worth the wait. And then I'm also testing berberine for LDL. So berberine works on multiple multiple genes for LDL regulation. So it works on the LDLR, it works on the PCSK9, it works on the HMG-CoA. So it ticks a lot of these boxes for cholesterol production, cholesterol receptors that reduce production, and then also inhibiting the production of it in general, but through different mechanisms to statins, so it has less side effects. But there's some pretty major results in animal studies. Let me just quickly find it. But there was one where they had almost a 50% reduction in LDL within 10 days. So that's a hefty. That's
huge.
Reduction. That's huge. And as I said before last time, 10% here and there won't help for me. I need these 40, 50 percenters, right, to get a good idea. So for me, the berberine's going to be a really interesting one because it hits three of the areas where I've got issues with the genes. It ticks all those boxes, and so I'll have those results in probably by midweek next week as well. So I'll be able to cover it in the next podcast. But I'm excited for that. And then the other thing I am excited to test for cholesterol too is lecithin. So there was a study in humans on lecithin. They used a soy lecithin. I'm going to test a egg yolk lecithin because the soy lecithin is shows high estrogenic activity, high phytoestrogens, right? They're like really quite high. And so I'm gonna test some egg yolk lecithin, but in human trials in hypocholesterolemic patients, 500 milligrams of soy lecithin a day for 8 weeks led to up to a 56% reduction in LDL. So you
Yeah.
can add fat and lose LDL, right? So it's an interesting concept. But obviously within lecithin, the predominant the predominant compound in there is phosphatidylcholine, and obviously within egg yolks, similarly, the highest phospholipid is phosphatidylcholine as well. So it would be interesting to see that. The only thing that I would say is that the fact that it does have estrogenic properties may also be contributing towards changes in cholesterol as well. There's various studies. Some show that as your estrogen levels goes up, it can actually reduce cholesterol levels. But and then also certain compounds in men as well, like tamoxifen citrate, which is obviously it blocks aromatase or binds to aromatase so that the estrogen can't. That'll actually lower LDL as well in men.
Mm.
So it's an interesting, there's something in that maybe there's some impact of the estrogenic activities of it, which are going to be contributing towards the cholesterol loss, and not just the lipids and the other compounds within there. But lecithin supports the creation of cholesterol, but also the removal of excess, and also helps it to mix with water, which helps for it to be lost, right? So if it can be mixed with water, then you can excrete it more easily. And also lecithin diets stimulate more bile acid as well, and bile acid is produced with cholesterol, carries cholesterol, and and can excrete cholesterol as well. It also supports liver metabolism too. So berberine and egg yolk lecithin are two things that I'm going to be interested to test for cholesterol at some point. If the sorghum and the berberine hit the mark, then I want to come back to these at some point in the future, because I'm done. Like, that's mission complete, and I'll come back and test them again in the future. If neither of those things hit the mark, then I think I'm going to look at the lecithin next, because I think that's an interesting idea that you can lower cholesterol with egg yolks, right?
Yeah. I've
That's
wanted
something
to
I'd love
do.
to.
I've wanted to do a phosphatidylcholine megadose experiment based on the product mitolipin that Georgie created. And like the compounds or the amounts is so low that I think you can get the same quantities from like four to six eggs or something like that. But
Yeah.
like his whole marketing aspect is that it's the saturated, right? So there's some research that suggests that the phosphatidylcholine can help to create cardiolipin.
Yeah.
And with aging, what happens to the cardiolipin? So cardiolipin is like a kind of a four-chain. How do I put this? It's like an anchor. It anchors the complexes of the electron transport chain, so it can actually work. The electrons can actually flow, and you can actually produce energy. So what happens with aging? The cardiolipin starts to get damaged, like these anchors, and they start to break, and the cells just disintegrate. So those cardiolipin, they are about 50%, if not higher, in linoleic acid, which is an omega-6. Right? This is what you usually see in like 20-year-olds. And then as people age, they convert to like omega-6, the fish oils, like the DHA, EPA, right? The very long chain, highly unsaturated, arachidonic. So linoleic acid contains 2 double bonds. So the more double bonds something has, the more fragile it becomes. So as you age, there's more highly unsaturated, more fragile lipids in the cardiolipin, which is actually gonna age you even faster. So the whole concept here is that you can either eat like a bunch of saturated fat and minimize your PUFA intake, and then the cardiolipin that is then being created is going to be more saturated, or you can supplement like the fully saturated phosphatidylcholine, and that will have the same effect, just in a supercharged way. So that was why I wanted to experiment with it. And what you can do is, I'm just struggling to find a source, unless you go on Alibaba or Made in China or something like that. You can buy fully hydrogenated lecithin. So it can either be from egg yolks or it can be from the soy. So I don't care too much about where it's coming from, because if it's fully hydrogenated, it's going to be fully saturated.
You
Right?
can get
So that's one of the things that I've been.
the sunflower oil one you can get as well, right? Which should probably, I think, maybe preferential over the soy one. But the issue, with the egg yolk one, the actual quantity of the phosphatidylcholine per capsule is, I think it's 50 milligrams. It's not very high. So I would probably have to take 10 to 20 capsules a day or something like that to get
Yeah.
to where I wanted to get to, right? But that's fine. I'm willing to, that's not a problem. Um, I took a product last year at one point, which was a combination of phosphatidylcholine and TMG, and that was really interesting from an energy point of view. I did feel really high energy on that, and I felt it to be quite a good product for training performance and things like that. And it's probably to do with that. You obviously you're feeding your energy production, and then you're also supporting it afterwards as well there, which is obviously a nice way of doing things. So yeah, that's something I'd be interested in trying too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's sweet, man. I'm looking forward to that. I don't know where I'm gonna do it, but I'm probably gonna do it as a mitochondrial experiment coming into the future because it's primarily gonna be used to create a cardiolipin, which will support the mitochondria to just work better, right? So I can expect better energy. So I'm gonna be looking at my exercise performance, especially when I'm doing more like HIIT training. The way I'm measuring that is on the trampoline. So I'm going to like a trampoline park and I can see like my power output of the nervous system. So like trampoline works very much precision, balance, coordination, those kind of stuff. And like when you start to get tired, you lose that coordination aspect, right? The nervous system is not like on fire anymore. And so this is how I measure my endurance capacity. Like how long can I have those crisp movements? And so that's how I'm gonna gauge it. Also like my heart rate, HRV, and like those regular markers. And I'm gonna do an organic acid test before and after to like really see if there's anything that I can see there. But last time I did the milk diet with PQQ, articles that on that is also in the Substacks. I'll link that for you guys below. My organic acid test was looking like pretty freaking amazing. Like, so I don't know what I'm gonna see there, but hopefully there's gonna be some interesting results when I make a dose done.
Yeah, yeah. I think perhaps in the near future we should cover a little bit more in detail about the different types of tests that people can look at, the benefits of different tests and things like that. So, for example, I've never done an organic acid test. It's something that I've got on my list of things I want to do, and I do. It's something that's really beneficial. Even up until fairly recently, I hadn't really done any full-on mineral analysis either. So I did a hair mineral analysis and these types of things. But I think it's useful for people to understand that what all these different tests are, what they do, how they can incorporate them, where they're going to see their most bang for buck, and so on and so forth. For example, you mentioned earlier different types of estrogen, for example, like obviously estrogen, estradiol, etc. And you can see those on something like a Dutch test, right? So people could look at things like that for the full breakdown of like, how's your DHEA doing? How's your androsterone? How's your all of those different components looking? And so I think it'd be good for us to cover that in at some point as well, for diving into testing.
Yeah, like what really matters, and then how to get more advanced, like the process that we follow on
Yeah.
how to structure testing and repeat testing and so on. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
great idea.
Because as I said before, most of the time when people come and most of the time when people they go to the lab, they get their testosterone measured and they start TRT really quickly. They haven't looked at anything else. They've looked at nothing.
Yeah.
Like they haven't done their homework on a single thing, and it, I think that's fine. But if the goal is to improve your health and increase your testosterone as a byproduct, and you're not too fussed about being like, if you're getting on TRT because you just want to improve your mood, libido, and like not be tired all the time, then you can do that naturally. If you want to build more muscle than you can build naturally, then testosterone is going to be your solution, right? If that's the route you want to go down. So I think that people often jump to it, and it's because they don't necessarily do the testing prior to that, heavy metal testing, etc., etc. All of these things can have a big impact on testosterone production.
Yeah, 100%. There's a lot of things we can cover in that upcoming episode. So
Yeah.
I think I covered everything that was of interest. How about you? Did you cover everything for
Yeah,
you?
yeah. I covered everything there I wanted to. Yeah, I've took. Yeah, the cholesterol stuff was the main thing, because it's obviously what I'm focused on heavily at the moment, and obviously a lot of people will have high cholesterol. I probably didn't dive quite into enough of like why people have high cholesterol, what cholesterol's for, but we can link an article to that in the copy below. I've got an article on that, or we can provide some extra information about why is your LDL high. I mean, LDL isn't cholesterol for a start, right? This is a confusion people get, is that the lipoproteins are actually cholesterol themselves. They're not. They carry it. Cholesterol is one thing. It's cholesterol, right? That's it. There's all of these dozens of lipoproteins that carry cholesterol. They do different things with their various density levels, etc. Which some are problematic. Some are integral to every action within your body, and so we maybe cover that in a little bit as well. But ultimately, people know that if their cholesterol levels are too high, then there's probably some things they want to do to fix that. You can obviously help it from a nutritional standpoint to an extent. I think this is where a lot of the time when people go on keto diets or carnivore diets, their cholesterol goes up very high because they're not balancing it with fiber. They're not balancing it with carbohydrates. They're not having a good insulin response and directing it. They're not necessarily getting in lots of the useful nutrients that they need in order to support its production and excretion and all these things. So, following a kind of optimum diet is going to be a great starting point. And then if you still have levels in excess that you want to do something about, then obviously you could experiment with different compounds. So.
Yeah. All right, we'll link everything related in the description below if you guys want to read more on this. And thank you for tuning in, and we'll check you in the next one. Cheers,
Thank
guys.
you, guys. See you soon.